Hello, this is Dr. Duello with a presentation on how to succeed in college in the first 3 weeks of each semester. Not just the first 3 weeks of the freshman year, but the first 3 weeks of each semester. Early in my career, when I was seeing a lot of students for advice and that, I recognized that there were three most common problems. The first was avoiding professors, which I did that to my detriment as well. Actually, the professors are there for you to learn. You have paid your tuition. You should be absolutely getting the most for the money and talking to professors and getting all of the knowledge that you can. We'll talk more about that. The second most common problem I saw was students who used the first exam to decide whether they were studying correctly. And when I give this presentation to a crowd, I usually get a lot of chuckles at about this point, because I said, how many of you kind of use the first exam as an experiment and think, okay, I'm going to take this, I'm going to find out how I'm doing, I hope, I pray that I do well. And you kind of get religion right before the first exam. But in fact, you want to go in knowing that you know the material, which entails talking to the professor, and that you have studied correctly, so that the first exam is an experiment. You then do well and you proceed with energy throughout the semester rather than doing poorly and then having to psychologically recover from that as well as prepare for the next exam. The third most common problem that I saw was not understanding that the best way to explain a C grade is to avoid it. And also, the way to do this is to see your professors, not use the first exam as an experiment. I note sometimes that students get their grades and they kind of feel like these grades just happened to them. They didn't know what was going to be there, and surprise, this is your grade. But in fact, if you've done everything correctly to prepare, to anticipate the exam, to talk to professors, get tutorial help, all of the assistance, you go into the exam with confidence and you make sure you're not getting C's. Everybody may have a few C's in their college record. If you have one, it's not the end of the world. If you have very many, then you're going to have a hard time explaining them away. And maybe there were good reasons, illnesses, stress, da-da-da-da-da. But when it comes to competing for graduate or professional school or a job, there are going to be people who did really well, so you're not going to be able to just explain away very many C grades. The other thing that I usually get a chuckle from students is that when I say the freshman year is not grade 13. And anybody who's a sophomore, junior, or senior will definitely agree with that. It will definitely be different, and there will be a cultural shift. I live here in Madison, Wisconsin. I have students who say, oh, that there's not going to be any culture shock associated with college because they lived in Madison all their life. They went to a local high school. They spent a lot of time on campus at events. Believe me, you're still going to undergo a type of cultural shock adjusting to college. So be aware of that. Get help, flow with it, so it's not quite so difficult. So one of the things that I want to talk about here is that some of the talents and skills that you needed to succeed in college are the same as in high school, and some are different. So I'm going to kind of try to dissect some of these out. It's still going to be true that higher education is not a 50-50 deal. If you have the attitude that, well, I'll meet you halfway and you have to meet me halfway, then you're not necessarily setting yourself up for success. You can't just say, I'll do my half and roll the dice and hope things work out. I always say, if you give it 110% and I give it 110%, we know that we're going to have enough for success here. But you really want to take full responsibility here for your learning and not attribute it to someone else. The next is that you still need to know how you learn best and how to adapt to different teaching styles. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. But I learned this from students as well. When I first began teaching, I was teaching microscopic anatomy to medical students, and there happened to be two students who were very, very different in their learning styles. One student could glance at it. One of these people with a photographic memory just retained everything. A close friend of his tried to adapt his learning style and said, you know what, I can go out on Wednesday and Thursday night, even though there's an exam on Friday, because I'll just absorb it, and he was studying as much as the other student. Well, for some of us it comes more easily than others, so you have to learn what is your learning style and how to adapt to different teaching styles, but you can't borrow somebody else's methods and be sure that they're going to work for you. So you have to be very cognizant of it. It's still true that if you have special needs, you have to have them addressed at the beginning of each semester. So whether it's maybe a hearing thing or not being able to see the board or access to the classroom, any kind of need that you have, number one, make sure that you get help at the beginning of the semester. I can tell you that as a lecturer, one of the things that's most frustrating is when you've given an entire talk for 50, 60 minutes and then someone comes up, excuse me, and says, I couldn't hear. And this is maybe because I wasn't speaking loud enough, my voice went downhill, the microphone wasn't working, but you're responsible for your learning. So telling me that at the end of the lecture doesn't help. So anytime you're in a class and you can't hear, just raise your hand and say, could you speak louder? Make sure that you make an adjustment right in the middle of the lecture, okay? This was one of my three most important, but I say always talk to your professors. Always, always, always. We design the courses, we teach the courses, we write the exams, we know what we feel is important. Hopefully we've conveyed that all to you, but absolutely always, always, always talk to professors. I have lots of stories from all of my years of advising. There was once when a young woman came in and she was terrified. She sat there in the chair in my office and she just quaked, even though she was meeting with me and I thought I was pretty easy to talk to. It turned out that she was having great difficulty in a particular course, happened to be genetics, and she studied alone to her detriment, and she didn't go up after class and listen to the questions and the answers, and so she didn't know really why she wasn't doing well either. So I wrote a contract with her. This was an exception to the rule. I wrote a contract with her and I said, okay, the next time you go to class, and after class there are these people down front talking to the professor, and I just want you to go to the edge and I want you to listen to the questions and the answers. And I said, do that and then come back and see me. And she did that. I then wrote another contract with her that said, okay, you go to the group who's talking to the professor, you stand and you listen, you ask one question, you get the answer, and then you can run away, because I understood the urge to run away. And she did that. I said, then come back. The third contract was going to be that you go down, you ask your question, and you walk the professor back to his or her office and continue to talk with him. And she came in the third time, and before we ever got around to the third contract, it was, Dr. Duello, I got it wrong. And I thought, okay, why is she excited about getting it wrong? And it's because by listening to other good questions and answers, she understood before the first exam, or the second exam in this case, that she didn't understand all of it, and she corrected her understanding. So can't tell you enough about how important it is to talk to all of your professors yourself, not all secondhand through others. So when you begin a new course, the first thing you do is read the syllabus and understand what is expected to you. Now, when I give this presentation to a live crowd too, I say, okay, how many of you get the syllabus in the course? And you go back to your apartment or your dorm room and you put it up on the shelf and you don't take it down until you want to find out when the first exam is. And usually about 3/4 of the room chuckles because they've been guilty of it too. So what you want to do at the very beginning of that course is read the objectives. And if the objectives are well written in that, they should not say, this is what I'm going to teach you. They should say, this is what you should be learning. And if they don't say exactly that, then go to the professor and have the professor clarify it. What are the expectations for what you are to be learning? Do not wait until the first exam. Do not wait until the final. This is very important that you have an understanding of the professor's expectations. Now, the next one I have is that you still need to know the art of asking an incisive question. What is an incisive question? Right to the heart of the matter. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons I have this website and one of the reasons I put these videos up is because so much of what I learned, I did not learn until my 30s and 40s. And one of them was the true art of asking a question. So one of the things that I tell all of my advisees is that you never ask a professor a yes-no question, because yes or no ends the conversation usually, definitely a no does, and you haven't learned anything, okay? So how often will a student say, will the test be hard? Of course the professor's going to say no. I wrote the exam last night. I took it. I did real well. So they're not the objective person on will the test be difficult. Even when you say, what will the course cover? They may say it's in the syllabus, this, and this, and there can be misunderstandings about what exactly was included and was not. But when somebody gives you a no answer, you've basically learned usually nothing. So let's just take the hypothetical, I'm a biologist, where the student is talking with a general question and says, what are the components of the lipid bilayer of a plasma membrane? And the professor proceeds to discuss the lipid bilayer. Profess, we love to talk. Professor, get us talking. The next, the student wants to know about the role of the nuclear pore, and the professor keeps talking and discusses the role of the nuclear pore. And this is a more specific question than the lipid bilayer of all plasma membranes. Then say there's another question, and we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. How does a ribosome attach to the endoplasmic reticulum? The professor talks about how it attaches, the role of the ribosome in channeling the newly synthesized protein into the lumen of the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, this is a hypothetical. Say the student says, and how many microfilaments are there in the average cell? Well, and I am extreme intentionally here just to make a point. And what the professor says, that's very interesting, however, and they redirect you. That's more detail than you need to know. We don't know. Focus on this, focus on that. The professor directs your attention away from that topic because it's not important and directs it to something that is. So what the strategy is here is you ask with a broad question. You're talking about the lipid bilayer. You're talking about an intermediate question, the nuclear pore, the channel through the ribosome into the etar. Now, if you ask very, very detailed questions and the professor either says that's too fine a detail or it's not important or we don't know, now you know the depth of your understanding and the depth of the expectation of the professor has of what he or she wants you to know. The way I summarize this, I'm a reductionist here, excuse me, is if you ask a general question, you get a general answer. And it's probably going to be very little information or new information. Is the test hard? No. You ask a specific question and you get a specific answer. And it's sentences. It's not a yes-no question. Okay? So think about the design, actually, of how you're going to ask these questions. So everything we've talked about pretty much so far is true for high school, it's true for college, it's going to be true for graduate school, professional school, jobs, wherever you go, okay? So let me just touch on a few things that are different. So number one, you don't skip class or sleep through it. I come from an era where there wasn't an open campus in high school, so you went to every class and you were there and they took attendance and everybody knew, okay? When you're in college, you can skip class You know, you're a grown-up now. You can decide to do that, but you're gonna miss the information, and you may get somebody else's notes, but they may not cover it completely, or you won't have the same understanding that you would have had having heard it directly from the professor. Sleeping through class, make sure you get enough sleep and rest. That's just important. One of the things that this makes me think of too is when I first started teaching, the medical students had a biochemistry class at 7:45 in the morning. And yes, some people skipped it and other people came. And I was joking with a student one morning in that, and it was like 9:30 or whatever, and I said, so did you sleep through biochem? And they said, no way. If you're going to get up for a 7:45 course, you're not going to sleep through it. If I was going to sleep, I would have stayed in bed. So absolutely no substitute for going to class. One of the things that I see over the years too is it's very easy to get behind quickly, of course, so you have to try and catch up. One of the things I tell students to do is you go through an assignment, and if there's something you don't understand, you put a little question mark in notes or in the board or whatever. Then you listen to the lecture and you see how many of those question marks you can remove. And then you ask the questions and make sure you can remove all of them. And then you review the information at the end of the week. Okay, what some people will do is they'll not look at their syllabus. They'll pull the syllabus off the shelf, and about 3 days before the exam, they start going over the material. So they go over it once, they go over it twice, maybe they get a third time, maybe not, and now they're in the exam. So the exam itself may be only their third exposure to the data. Whereas if you do the assignment and you know your questions, and then you ask your questions, and then you review it at the end of the week, by the time you start studying specifically for the exam, that's your fourth exposure, not your first. So of course, learning is going to be much easier. One of the things I notice is sometimes in high school, college too, independence is highly valued by the students definitely, and it may have been highly rewarded. So you think you want to make your mark and you want to make it by yourself and the glory is all yours. But that's not how it always works in college, okay? As I said, in undergrad, I studied alone to my detriment. Part of it was because I took classes and I worked, so when I got home at 9 o'clock at night, I didn't have a study group in my kitchen as I was going about my work. So you need others, you need professors, and working as a team. Actually, too much independence can be detrimental because, as I say, there are all those resources. You want to be able to take advantage of them, and there are really no rewards for going through college on your own. If you get done and you have an average record and that nobody's going to give you prizes because you didn't get help. As a matter of fact, teamwork is so highly valued, and that there are not going to be rewards for trying to do things solo. Related to this is the idea of you still need a safety net. I call it a safety net of at least 3 people. And I say at least 3, but there are people who will say, oh, you need much more than that. Fine, the more the merrier. One of the things I refer to as these as your go-to people. Okay, who can you go to with questions? Who can you go to? Well, you can always go to the professor of the course, but maybe there's a favorite prof, a mentor, maybe in grad school, or whatever, there's a translator, okay? It's somebody who can tell you what's important, what this means. That's like mentoring as well, okay? Again, I chuckle because one time years ago, I had a student come to me and they actually happened to want advising to go to medical school. And they had a biology advisor and they said, well, will you be my advisor? And I said, well, I'll be more than happy to advise you. And they said, well, if you're my advisor, what do I do with this guy? Thinking that you could only have one advisor, one mentor, whatever. And absolutely not the case. The more the merrier. Collect all of this information. Different people have different perspectives. you can process them. I do a lot of recruiting of students to grad school. One of the points that I make is that when you go on from high school to college, or in this case from college to graduate school, take your network with you. You don't have to get rid of everybody and start over again. So I tell students, if you're in graduate school and there's just something and you just don't know about it, I say, it's okay to call me and say, is this kind of fishy? Or is this just graduate school? And I say, this is just graduate school. Okay, so you need somebody to bounce ideas and issues off of, definitely. One of the things I see that's particularly interesting to me is that sometime when you come into college, you may have to re-examine and possibly readjust your expectations of individual educators. You remember that they are people, they're individuals, they all have their own personality. And as I like to say, yes, professors put their pants on one leg at a time. We are regular people, even if we seem irregular sometimes. So one of the points about this is I sometimes see students who had just a wonderful teacher in high school. And this teacher was so wonderful and cared about their coursework, cared about their career plans, cared about their off-site job, cared about their private life, everything. And this was just a wonderful individual. And then you may come to college and you may look for all of those properties, all of those characteristics in one individual, and you may not find that, and then you may be disappointed. So prepare yourself that college is different, and you may find, and this is the network as well, you may need to find a number of people who have these characteristics, who can fulfill specific needs for mentoring, whatever that you have. So actually, I'm going to talk just a little bit here about interactions with professors, and there's a paper, a citation here at the bottom. Professor Audi wrote a paper back in 1994 on the ethics of teaching and the ideals of learning, and it was published in Academe. And you can look at lots of different teaching and learning models, and they'll all have different names and divisions, etc. So this is just one, but I really like it, and I just want to show you that all your professors aren't going to be the same, and your interactions with them aren't going to be the same. So what Audi does is he divides it up into what he calls the didactic model, which is listen to me. That is your, old school lecturer who stands at the podium and imparts information from you, and you just dutifully write it down. There may be professors with the friendship model who say, we're good buds, follow me, like, we'll do this together. There's what they call the apprentice model, and rather than broad concept of mentoring about ideas and philosophies and everything else, it tends more toward developing skills rather than imparting information, kind of like, apprentice electricians, carpenters, whatever skills. And the collegial model, which says, okay, I'm your role model, you be my junior colleague. Now, when you read, and please do just go on the internet and you can Google this and search it and read this article. It's only about 5 pages and it's great. Okay. One of the things that Audi does with this is he explains that in basically an authoritarian system, you have the didactic model and the apprentice model, meaning listen to me, copy me. Is pretty much what it is saying, and that's a top-down type of organization. The other one is more egalitarian, more of a horizontal, the friendship model being be my best friend, and the collegial model being be my junior colleague. Now, I could be really wrong about this. I'm a baby boomer, but I definitely think in the millennial generation that this generation tends to like the egalitarian model more so of be my friend or my mentor, or my let me be your model. One of the quotes that I really like from this is that Audi makes the point that the friendship model is very difficult for the professor to realize without compromising their moral obligations to students. And yes, we have moral obligations to students. Yes, we do, to teach you. So I really identified this because just looking at my own career, I'm a friendly person and I have to be careful in my interaction with students that they don't think this is just the friendship model, that we're going to be good buds, because then it becomes very difficult to correct someone, actually sometime to advise, to redirect students in that, because best friends don't do that. That's why it's not always best to get advice from best friends, because their relationship with you may interfere with the information that they really need to give you. So this is really important. And again, I think about myself because I tend to be pretty friendly. Also, as a woman in science, over 33 years, I've run across situations where, because I'm female, people tend, and friendly, people tend to see me as mom or auntie or good friend, whatever. So I have to actually watch that in myself and be aware of that with students. One of the things is actually just referring to myself as Dr. Duello. And you can say, well, why can't we call you Teresa? You know, we're all the same here. We can be friendly, whatever. But what happens is when you combine my friendliness and what I hope is helpfulness with Teresa, it's so easy to become mom or auntie or great friend. So actually, I keep the formality of Dr. Duello or Dr. D. We make it a little more casual. I have a different relationship in my laboratory with the people that I work with, but outside of my office in my lab, I'm Dr. Duello. And this isn't just because I'm hard-nosed, it's because I have to maintain some distance actually to fulfill my obligations to the student. So coming back here, again I say college is not just grade 13. It will definitely be different. There will be a cultural shift. You will change. Even if you don't think you're going through culture shock, you are. This is a picture of me in high school, and this is a picture of me when I graduated. So I just want to show you that as much as I physically, my appearance changed in those 4 years, thank God for contacts, I changed as a person as well. I became older, more mature. I became a different thinker, a critical thinker. It's just part of maturing and growing up. But truly, you will see this much change in yourself. I have students who are freshmen in class, and then I'm just amazed when I meet them as juniors and seniors at how much they've changed in a very, very good way. So all of this is going to happen. If you resist it, it may be painful. It's hard to kind of recognize sometimes that things are happening in the present. But if you're troubled by something, try use just a little bit hindsight and see where you're coming from and where you're headed to, because there are a lot of people who are here to help you and want to help you to make that transition into doing really well in college. So one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was work hard, play hard. Work hard, play hard. And actually, for most of my career, I hadn't learned that. And it was work hard, fall down, because I would work until I was exhausted. And then you're exhausted and you're trying to work and you're not working effectively. It's like sitting down and saying, okay, I've got 6 hours of organic chemistry tonight. Well, 6 hours can be crippling, just the thought of sitting there. What I have students do is actually go out and buy a kitchen timer and set it for 15 or 20 minutes and commit yourself to study that long, and then get up and go get a drink and walk back. Okay? Divert yourself. Break it up into smaller periods of time. The other great one, when your mind is tired, exercise your body. And when your body is tired, exercise your mind. I learned this the hard way too, because maybe I would sit down when I really wasn't mentally at my peak. I was tired, I was distracted, whatever, and I would sit down and I would try to write. And I may write for 3.5 hours, and then I threw most of it away and only kept maybe what was equivalent to an hour of work. Whereas if I were working hard, I walked away from it, I got mental rest, I got physical exercise, I could come back and do the same task in half the time, if not less. So you really want to take care of yourself mentally, and you really want to take care of yourself physically, and there are a whole group of people at your institution who want to help you do that. If you have any questions at all, you can email me at this email address or on this website. If there's anything you didn't understand or anything I might do to improve it. Thank you very much.